Hey everybody, episode 2 today. I'm so glad that you're all here. I love watching the chat starting to go by already before we get started. I'm so happy that you're here. Andrew has basketball today, so George is still on his way home from that. So I have Evie sitting on the floor, so I might be kind of up and down. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully they're going to be on their way here. It has been storming like crazy ever since last night, like thunderstorms, lightning, everything else. And so we have lost power a couple of times. So if I happen to blink out, I will be back as soon as possible, or I will update as soon as I can. So it should be okay. We haven't lost power in a while, so hopefully we're going to be all good. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad. Happy new moon, by the way. Yesterday was the new moon in Taurus, I believe. Is that right, Timana? And so this is a time of transformation and letting go and really like beginning to manifest your new life. And so I want to invite you guys again, if anybody is interested in joining me starting on June 1st, I am going to be doing kind of like a 6-month transformation. And I'm going to be really focusing so much on my energy and how to support myself. And it's such a perfect thing to talk about during Mental Health Awareness Month, because I feel like what we often do is we love that brand new of the beginning of the year and we set resolutions. Let me know in the comments if you set New Year's resolutions. I usually just set goals, kind of this is what I want to get done for the rest of the year or what I want to accomplish this year. But I haven't really been setting, I guess, resolutions so much as just my typical like HB90 goals. But I was kind of thinking about this, like starting it in June and July of a 6-month transformation kind of feels like a reverse New Year's resolution. It's kind of like a resolution to transform my energy and really support myself as much as possible before the new year hits for 2022. I guess that kind of makes some sense. So the baby is on the floor. We just bought her a brand new Samsung Galaxy Tab tablet with a little case so that she can kind of sit down here and watch some Netflix. So I've got it turned down. Hopefully she hasn't figured out how to turn it up yet, but she's sitting quietly. So I'm going to just let her do that so she's not running around. But if she stands up, she can come be seen over here. So that's where she is. But I would love for anybody to join me in this. I think that, sometimes I've talked about this already kind of last week a little bit, but sometimes what gets hard when you're putting yourself out there, and this is true for any of you who are authors too, you'll kind of get to know this, or if you have any kind of entrepreneurial business or business where you need to be seen, like on live streams, live 3 times a week, or you're running groups, or you're a leader in some way, is that, I think a lot of people kind of expect for people who are leaders or influencers, although I don't love that word, to always be high energy. Like that's why you come here, because it makes you feel good to be here on a Wednesday and hang out, and all of that stuff. And that is important for me too. But at the same time, like nobody can be up all the time. And so I think that part of my transformation and part of my journey coming up for the next 6 months or so till the rest of this year is going to be about finding ways to really manage my energy in such a way that it's like truly supporting myself mentally, because I feel like I want to do so much more than what I'm capable of in terms of my time. And so obviously I'm constantly working on this. For those of you that follow the HB90 method and my other channel, my Heart Breathings channel, you know that I'm constantly and consistently working on this thing of balance, but I want to do even more because I feel like there is so much that is really and truly within my control. There's Daddy's home. She's sitting so nicely and quietly. There's really so much more in our control. There are a lot of things outside of our control. All of this stuff, truthfully, in the world, like between COVID and being, out of work and everything else that we've had so forth, and so forth for this past year, I think it's been hitting me so much harder that a lot of times I don't take control of the things that I really have control of, if that makes sense. And I want to do more of that. And I want to continue to be able to show up in a good way, but an authentic way. And what I appreciate most about this community is that you guys let me talk honestly about that kind of stuff. Like when I'm going through a harder time or when I'm lower energy, you guys stick with me and hang out with me despite some of that low energy. And today has been a rough day for me. And I never want to come on and complain or put any burdens, because I know I have such a great life and I really am grateful for everything that I have been given in this life. But at the same time, there are some days that are harder than others. In the past few weeks, I think I've been kind of dealing with some post-traumatic stress, the stuff that kind of comes up every once in a while. So I think so. Renee says we would so much rather you be you and be honest because you need to vent sometimes. And I get that, but I also think that there is, you know, if you're going through your own stuff, you don't necessarily want to watch somebody else be like, oh, I'm going through a hard time. Cause then you're like, I wanted to be uplifted today. And I want to be that person for you guys. But at the same time, I do want to show the truth of the fact that it is not possible. I think that what happens, I wish I could say this the way that I really want to say it, because I feel like it's such an important message right now for myself and for some people that really need to hear this, is that you come online, you get inspired by certain people because they have good energy and they're showing you how they're getting things done. And, you know, hopefully you find that inspiring. But at the same time, I think there is a point where those of us who are in the position of sharing our lives or trying to inspire or trying to teach or trying to, you know, write and be, again, I can't think of a better word than influencer, even though I don't like that word. I guess a leader in a certain space, is that the danger is if you don't show the truth of what it's really like, then you make people feel like that your life is just perfect and that their lives should be the same. And then you feel guilty for ever having down days because you think, well, Sarah never has down days. Sarah gets things done all the time. Look at her every single quarter, and she keeps writing books and she keeps doing this, and she's got 2 kids at home, and, you know, I can't be like that, whatever. And so I think that in that way it is important. And that's kind of what I'm facing right now. It's like, it's important for me to share the truth of the struggle, because like nobody, it doesn't matter if you have millions of dollars, which I don't, by the way. It doesn't matter if you have millions of dollars or like the perfect career or thousands of followers, or, you know, you're writing your first books, or, you know, whatever it is. It's like, it doesn't matter if you were on the New York Times bestseller list 100 weeks in a row. Everybody has down times. Everybody has down energy at some point, and everybody has things they struggle with mental health. And it may not be a mental illness or whatever, but we all have our struggles. We all have our mountains that we have to climb. And some people's are harder than others, but as an individual, everybody's mountain is difficult for them. And so I think that it's important to show that, but I feel like there's a fine line between showing it and then not finding that way to bring it back to a place where everybody feels good. Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm rambling. But yeah, and nobody can be high energy all the time. And I go through periods where I think, you know, should I show the high energy and hide the rest because people don't really want to see that? Or do I just show it all? And I think that is a constant struggle for me. So I just want it to stay a dialogue, I guess, between those of you that are consistently here and consistently following, because the option would be to put on a fake face or to just disappear and say, I'm taking a break for 2 months and then come on back when I feel like my energy is back at its highest. But I don't really want to be fake. But I also don't want to be a downer. So I think I've just got that kind of like, constant struggle between the two things. And book deadlines are some of the hardest times, I think, but there's also stuff going on behind the scenes that is difficult in my life right now, that I am working through. And so thank you guys for continuing to be here. And what's interesting, I would say funny, but it's coincidental, I guess, is that today's episode is really a hard episode in terms of emotions for Harper. And this is a hard book for her in general. So it's rainy outside. It's stormy. I have shed quite a few tears today. It's been a little bit of a tough day. And now I will pour this emotion into poor Harper's moments, because there are going to be some really tough things going on for little Harper today. We have 11 pages to read in episode 2. So this is a little bit longer. So I want to go ahead and get started with the reading. But thank you guys for the feedback, and obviously, I think all of these things are kind of hard to navigate and hard to balance, because I also feel like sometimes if you admit that you're having a struggle, then suddenly it brings out judgment in people too, that they say, oh, well, you should be doing this. Why aren't you doing more of this? Or why aren't you taking better care? Or you should really get more sleep, or, other things like that. And then it starts to feel like not only the advice coming at you, which I actually appreciate the advice, but the judgment stuff. And that is warranted, because when you put your life out there, people are going to judge you. And that's just the way it is. But, oh no, Jennifer says, I've been doing taxes. I needed the emotional release. I hear you 100%. But just know, for me, you're always going to get something authentic. But as I was sitting here for the last 30 minutes, kind of thinking about how today would go and what I would say, it's like, should I try to listen to some happy music and pretend that it's been a good day? And then I was thinking, I just don't think I can do that, to be honest. So you guys get just the truth of me, and hopefully I am in for better energy. And one thing that I can promise you, and this is what I'm hoping that I will be able to take you on this journey, doing some vlogs on this 6-month journey, is that I had periods in my life where, when I got into this state where it was hard to get out of bed in the morning, or things were kind of tough, or I felt close to tears a lot, or my energy was low, I've had periods in my life where for a year or more, I truly just didn't try anything new. I've talked about this in some of my RWA speeches and stuff like that. So some of you have heard this before. I think maybe in HB90, I mentioned it too, but I had literally almost a whole year of my life where I just binge ate food and watched Investigation Discovery Channel all the time, because true crime is just a fun place to hang out. I don't know. I know that sounds so messed up, but I think that the difference and the growth that I can see in myself right now is that I can be the observer of myself, instead of just living in that place where I'm going to lose myself there. I have moved on to a stage where I can see it happening, that I don't want to call it depression exactly, but I can see that response in myself, and I can see that I don't want to stay there, but I can't force myself out of it. So I have to kind of coax and love myself out of it, if that makes sense. And so if you are in a hard place right now, which I think globally we kind of are, there's a lot of people have had a really hard time over the past year. Just know that you're not alone, and we're going to get through this together. Tomorrow, I am having an all-day session with my tarot mentor, Tanya Gonzalez. She is going to meet with me all day. We're going to clear the energy of the house. We're going to set up a new altar for myself. So I won't be vlogging that entire experience, but I am going to probably put some of that on video, the process of setting up the altar and things like that. So I think that it'll be a valuable thing to kind of clear my space out a little bit, and pulling on this new moon energy too. So I appreciate that. JC says, when I discovered your channel, you and your personality is what helped pull me out of a depression and extreme writer's block. Well, that is a very sweet thing to say. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I love that, but that's also my fear of sharing what's going on if I can't have great big energy. Am I going to pull people down if they're I want to be the uplifting person, but when I'm down, I can't necessarily give that side of myself 100%. So Gabriella, my tarotista partner, how exciting to have Tanya to work with. I am so very excited to work with her on this. And I think I mentioned to you guys before that we are going to be having Tanya on this channel. There will be more about that coming up. I will definitely let you guys know about that well in advance, but she is going to be joining us for a coffee chat, and we are going to talk about lunafesting. So I will be joining you guys, or she'll be joining us on that journey coming up soon too. So that's going to be really fun. All right. So episode 2 of Rival Demons. Last episode, if you missed the first episode of this, we started off exactly where Shadow Demons had left off, which is Jackson, Marianne, and Leah pulled Harper through the portal. And so as soon as they basically get oriented to where they are, they have to begin clearing off these black roses that are holding the portal energy open. And you're going to find out a little bit more about how black roses, we know how they work in the human world, but energy works a little bit differently here in the shadow world. So you'll get to see that a little bit more as we progress through this book. And so they're trying to cut down these black roses to close the portal, because it's the only way they can close it is if they kill the roses that have grown up. And as they're doing so, 2 tigers come through. So these are shape-shifting witches that are twins that shape-shift into tigers, and they attack, and Harper is getting really scared that she's going to lose all of her energy and then maybe lose her life. But then when she sees that Marianne has been really badly injured, she just embraces this rage and hatred in herself so much that it scares her. Like her skin begins to boil, and she basically brought a bunch of rocks down on top of one of the tiger twins, killing her. So now she's got an extra enemy, as well as kind of doubting herself and her own energy. So they quickly whisked them away from there. And as they were kind of talking about their plans, as Harper was recovering and Marianne was recovering, she finds out from Jackson that we're going to this place called the Underground. And she doesn't know where that is, but she's thinking it's near home. But then she finds out from him that actually you can never go home, because the order will never stop looking for you. So as far as Harper knows at this point, she's trapped in the shadow world for the rest of her life. Then the other big twist that she found out there was trying to talk about whether the king of the Northern Kingdom would help them out and build an army to fight the order. They find out that no, the king is going to be useless in this matter. And how do they know? Because he is Leah's father. So that is where we are starting off. The name of this chapter, chapter 6, is Rivals. You're a princess? You say that like it's so hard to believe, Leah said with a sly smile. In her leather pants and tight corset top, she didn't look like any princess I had ever imagined. Plus, she didn't exactly seem refined and regal. She was more biker chick than royalty. Of course, I had no idea what royalty even meant in the shadow world. Maybe their princesses were supposed to be tough and snarky and difficult in every way. Close your mouth, she said. You look like an idiot. I hadn't even realized I had my mouth open. I shut it quickly, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I am just surprised, I guess. Don't be, she said. My father didn't think I was a good princess material either. I was a constant disappointment to him and my mother both. Is that why you left? I glanced from her to Jackson. I had a feeling I knew why she left, but I wanted to hear her say it. She shrugged and sat down. Partly, I guess. She looked down at her boots, and partly because Jackson had gone. Airden was my friend too, you know. We all grew up together. And my father? Well, he refused to help after Airden went missing. He was too scared of what the Order might do to his kingdom if he invaded their territory. I bit my lip. She'd gone because of Jackson, not his brother. I felt pretty certain of that. So your father is the king of the entire shadow world? No, she said, the world is divided into 2 kingdoms, the north and the south. My father is the king of the north. And what about the king of the south? I asked. Would he be willing to help us? Jackson and Leah exchanged silent glances. What? I hated it when they did that. It always made me feel like they were keeping things from me. Or maybe what really bothered me is that they were obviously sharing in something I couldn't be a part of. Forget about the entire Southern Kingdom, Jackson said. They won't help us. His answer wasn't good enough for me. I knew he wasn't telling me the whole truth. Why not? I pushed. Because the two kingdoms are rivals, Leah said, enemies of the worst kind. If anyone so much as crosses the border between lands, the king has them thrown into his dungeons to rot. Wars have been fought in the lands between the kingdoms, leaving nothing but ghosts and monsters. Even if we wanted to, we'd never make it there alive. I swallowed nervously. The way Leah's voice cracked a bit when she said ghosts terrified me. If it was something she was this obviously afraid of, it was something I wanted no part of. Does the Order take demons from their side of the shadow world too? Or is that just the North? Another look passed between Jackson and Leah. I wanted to confront them about it, but I was so tired of being angry. We don't know, Jackson said. I would assume so, yes. But there's been no communication between the two sides for a very long time. The Southern Kingdom is completely separate from us, as if they were a part of a totally different world. I never came across any demons in the human world who were from the South, Leah said, but that's not saying much, especially since I couldn't find a way to communicate directly with any of the demons who were already slaves. It was rare to find a free demon like Jackson and myself. So it's possible that the Kingdom of the South would want to fight against the Order, I said, even if it meant pairing up with some of the demons in the North for a little while. Leah rolled her eyes. You don't know what you're saying, she said. The rivalry is ancient. There is hatred so strong between my father and the King of the South that nothing, not even a common enemy, could bring them together. Frustrated, I leaned back against the wall of the cave. How would she know if no one had even tried? If no one had talked to the demons in the South for more than 100 years, how could they possibly know what was going on over there? It's complicated, Jackson said. Don't forget that demons are immortal in this world. Here, we don't pass into the afterworld unless we choose to, or unless our lives are wrongfully taken from us. Immortal means forever, Leah said, and trust me when I say that forever is an awfully long time when it comes to holding a grudge. I had so many more questions, but I was having a hard time keeping my eyes open. Besides, it seemed like each answer just led me to another question. And since we weren't leaving this world anytime soon, I figured I had time to ask more questions later. I'm going to go lie back down, I said. I curled up close to the warm fire and willed my mind to stop spinning. Leah got up and walked back toward her post at the cave's entrance. Jackson leaned over me and placed a warm kiss against my forehead. When Marianne wakes up, we'll try to get on the road, he said. He placed a blanket over me and I pulled it close. Get some sleep. I'll be up front guarding the entrance to the cave if you wake up and need anything, okay? I nodded, then closed my eyes and fell fast asleep. Chapter 7, Shattered. A gentle nudge woke me the next morning. The fire had long since gone out, but a shimmer of light gleamed in from the mouth of the cave. I yawned and looked up, surprised to see worry on Jackson's face. What is it? I whispered. What's wrong? His eyes darkened, but he forced a smile. I want to show you something. I pushed the blanket from my body and sat up, wincing as my bones cracked and my muscles protested. I wondered how long it would take before I started to feel normal again. I still wore the white ritual dress the Order had put me in the day they intended to sacrifice my life. It was stained with blood and dirt, and a long tear ran up the side. I could only hope Jackson wanted to show me a fresh pair of clothes and a nice place to take a shower. Marianne and Leah both slept toward the back of the cave, and we were careful not to disturb them. My feet ached against the rock at the entrance of the cave. No shoes. I frowned down at my dirty feet, pale against the craggy black rock. This was going to be a problem. Jackson wrapped his arms around me and pressed his lips to my ear. Look, he whispered. I had been so busy looking at the ground, I hadn't even noticed the shadow world beyond the cave. When I lifted my eyes, the beauty of the place took my breath away. The sky shone in silvers, blues, and pinks that shimmered against the water of an endless ocean. I knew we had been hiding out in a cave, but for some reason, I hadn't noticed the sound of the water crashing against the rocks below. All that stood between us and the ocean was a small ledge about 10 feet wide that ran in a winding path up and down on either side. "It's beautiful," I said, wishing I had stronger words. In some ways, it was like Earth, but it was also different. The colors were brighter and more alive, more shimmery and full of motion, and somehow everything just felt bigger. Daring to look down, I stepped carefully onto the rocky path and leaned out over the edge. The side of the cliff was steep and cut an almost straight line down to the water. If I had to guess, I would say it was at least 200 feet down. Still holding on to Jackson, I turned and looked up, shocked to see the top of the cliff was almost just as far away. "How did you even find this place?" He smiled. "Airden and I found this cave when we were really young. We used to explore all over the place back then. Besides, it's not quite as scary when you can fly." I laughed. He had a point. "So this is close to where you grew up?" I turned back toward the water and sat down on a smooth black rock at the edge of the cave. Jackson sat down next to me, but when I moved to take his hand, he pulled away. "Relatively close," he said, acting like nothing had happened. "We're close enough that we could get anywhere before nightfall if we walked it, but Leah and I wanted to make sure we were far enough away that we could avoid being detected by the sentinels." "Sentinels?" I asked. I tried to keep the conversation going, but I couldn't help but feel something was off with him. "The King's Guard, I guess you could call them," he said. "They're supposed to patrol the countryside and protect all of the towns, but they really only protect the king and the council. When we first came through the portal, we were trying to avoid casting any magic, hoping they would never know we'd come through. After the tigers came after you, though, we had no choice." "What's wrong with magic?" I asked, not understanding. "Our magic leaves a signature here," he said, "something others can trace even from great distances." I stared out over the water, speechless, as a second sun rose, sending a blast of lavender-colored light across the silvery clouds. There was so much to learn about the shadow world and how things ran here. I had so many questions. I knew there was no way to get them all answered this morning, so I chose my questions carefully. "How come Leah doesn't want to see her father?" I asked. "Wouldn't we be safer in the city if we had sentinels to protect us?" "It's complicated," he said. "When Leah left to come to the human world, she was in direct disobedience to her father's orders. The king doesn't take well to being disobeyed." "You're saying he would hurt her if he knew she was home?" "No." He bit his lip and ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know, maybe. He would definitely punish her, probably lock her away for a while and never let her leave again. For her, that would be the same as torture." "So why even risk coming back here?" I asked softly. I knew she hadn't come back because she cared about me. It was obvious Leah didn't give a crap about me. In fact, I was pretty sure she hated me. So why risk everything? "Because I asked her to," Jackson said. His words were simple, but to me, they cut like a knife. All he had to do was ask, and she was willing to risk her entire life's work, leave her best friends behind in the human world. Ever since Jackson had first introduced me to Leah, I knew there was more to their story than just an old friendship. Now, with him acting weird and pulling away from me, I wondered just how much there was between them. I wanted to ask, but I was too afraid to find out the answer. "Thank you," I said finally, "for coming to get me. You saved my life back there." Hesitating, he took my hand in his and brought it to his lips, kissing my skin softly. I was so scared when they took you away from us. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you. The feel of his lips against my skin felt amazing, but I was so confused. What was really going on between us? I turned to meet his eyes. The sadness that twisted my gut. They held you captive for 8 days, he said. Those were the worst 8 days of my life. I wasn't sure I'd ever see you again. I'm so sorry, Harper. I told you I would keep you safe, and then I just let them take you. I scooted closer to him on the rock and put my arms around him. He stiffened, then slowly returned my embrace, hugging me tight. It wasn't your fault, I said. I never should have gone wandering around in that field. I never should have left the camp. I got too confident that we were okay after all that traveling. I completely underestimated the order. I looked down at my tattered dress. I won't let that happen again. Footsteps sounded behind us, and Jackson pulled away as if I'd burned him. Can I talk to you for a second? Leah asked, tension in her voice. Jackson sighed, then excused himself. Together, they walked back into the cave, whispering too low for me to hear. Leah seemed to be lecturing him about something, and whatever it was, Jackson wasn't happy about it. A dark feeling came over me when Jackson returned, his expression tight. His jaw tensed, and he began to fidget. Harper, there's something else I brought you out here to talk about. The seriousness in his voice made my insides twist. I shifted on the rock, suddenly feeling very uncomfortable. We're leaving today to go to this place I was telling you about earlier, he said, the underground. Okay, I said, waiting for the bomb to drop. I just thought it would be good for you to understand how things work down there, he said, as far as rules and magic and politics. I cleared my throat, finding it difficult to swallow. He rubbed his palms against his jeans. There are some rules I'm going to need you to follow. He pulled a small vial from the pocket of his jeans. The liquid inside glowed deep purple. What's that? Juiced made potions for you and Marianne before we left the human world. They will make you see all the demons down here as if they were human. It will also make you hear everything in English rather than any demon language. He thought it would help make your transition here smoother. Well, that was nice of him, I said, taking the vial from Jackson and uncorking it. How long will it last? For as long as you're here in the shadow world, he said. I stared down at the liquid. Part of me was curious to see the demon world exactly as it was. I'd seen Airden's true form a couple of times before, and even though it was different, he hadn't really scared me. Still, an entire city of demons speaking in a foreign language might get to be a bit overwhelming, especially if they were all staring at me like they hated me. I took a deep breath, then emptied the vial into my mouth and swallowed. Surprisingly, it tasted sweet. What else? I asked. The first part hadn't really been a rule, I noticed, but I let him continue. We can't cast any magic until we get down there, he said. It's too easy to track. I nodded. No magic, easy enough as long as we weren't being attacked. You said it was just until we got to the underground, though, right? I asked. Can we do magic once we get down there? Yes, they are so deep under the surface and buried under a special stone that blocks the trace from being seen or felt by anyone on top. He said, once we get down there, magic use will be fine. Still, you'll want to play it very low key, okay? It will be very important that you listen to me and do what I tell you. I chewed on my inner lip. I had never been one to respond well to the phrase, do what I tell you, but I would try to behave. What else? I asked, suddenly feeling that the worst was yet to come. He looked up, staring out across the ocean. His knee jerked up and down. There was still something he was nervous about having to tell me. "Just say it," I said, my stomach full of butterflies. "How bad can it be?" Jackson ran his fingers along his forehead, then finally met my eyes. "You know how I feel about you, right?" Ouch. That was never a good start to a conversation. "Yes," I said, a tremble in my voice. "Once we leave this cave, we can't let anyone know we have any sort of relationship beyond the fact that you're connected to my brother." I swallowed, but felt a lump of worry stick in my throat. Was he breaking up with me? "It's forbidden for shadow demons to have romantic relationships with humans," he said. "The way my people see it, that's how we got into this mess with the Order in the first place. Friendships are tolerated when the human is sympathetic to our cause, but never more than that." I tried to breathe, but despite the open air, I suddenly felt very claustrophobic. I couldn't find my voice. Jackson stood up and stared at the water, his body tense. "It's not like I wanted things to be this way," he said, finally turning toward me, "but we don't have any choice. The underground is the only place where I can guarantee that you'll be safe." Safe. And completely alone. It was obvious he and Leah had already discussed this, which only hurt me more. The idea of staying down there forever was bad enough when I thought we were going to be together, but the thought of never kissing him again or feeling his arms around me, or worse, watching him fall in love with Leah? What kind of life was that going to be? "I won't go," I said. He couldn't make me go somewhere I didn't want to go. Jackson's face grew red. "Yes, you will," he said. "I won't sit back and let the Order take you away from me again." I stood, scowling. "No, but you'll willingly take yourself away from me in the name of safety. How is that any different?" "At least this way I can watch over you," he said. "You'll be alive and safe." "And completely miserable?" I shook my head. "That's not the life I want." "You'd rather have no life then?" he shouted. "Don't be stupid, Harper." Tears welled up in my eyes and I swiped at them. "I don't understand why we can't just keep running," I said. "If you really loved me, why wouldn't you do everything you could to be with me? There has to be some place else we could hide. The mountains, somewhere out there on the ocean. This can't be the only choice." Jackson put both hands on my shoulders and held me tight. "Harper, don't you know that I would give anything to be with you?" he said. There were tears in his green eyes for the first time. "Believe me, if I thought there was any chance we could run from the Order, I would run until the end of time. But they would find us, and they would kill us both. The underground is our only chance. It's the only place you'll be safe." I pulled away and leaned against the side of the cliff. This couldn't be happening. "Harper, please." Jackson stood behind me, the warmth of his body against my back. He leaned his forehead against the back of my head, but despite his closeness, I could already feel a deep well growing between us. "Please." Tears streamed down my face. There was no winning this argument. He had already made up his mind. "Okay," I said. My heart shattered deep inside my chest. "I'll go." I didn't want to look at him. I just wanted to stare out at the ocean and let the sorrow crash over me like a wave. But Jackson pulled me closer. "Harper, look at me." I met his clear green eyes as he leaned in to kiss me one last time. Our lips were wet with salty tears, and for a moment, I thought I might drown in them. I wrapped my arms around his neck and pulled him close, as if he were my life raft. The kiss deepened, and he pulled me tighter, both of us desperate for it to never end. But eventually, all things must come to an end. Chapter 8, The Closest Thing I Have Left to a Family. Back inside the cave, I sat beside Marianne and waited for her to wake up. Jackson and Leah moved toward the entrance to discuss plans for the journey to the underground, but I wanted to be as far away from them as possible right now. Inside, my heart was breaking. How could Jackson do this to me? How could he sweep me away to this place, give me hope of a better future, and then take it all away? It wasn't fair. I couldn't imagine a life where I would be standing next to him, yet forbidden to touch him. I would go to his underground, get my strength back, learn to take control of my own magic so that someday I would be able to leave and fight the Order on my own. There was no way I could stay there for the rest of my life. Beside me, Marianne shifted and moaned. I leaned over and felt her forehead. Her fever seemed to have passed, but her skin was still deathly pale, except for the red scratch across her cheek. Jackson was hoping to leave this afternoon, but I wasn't so sure she'd be ready to travel. Her eyes opened slowly, and she squinted up at me. "Harper?" "Hey," I said with a smile. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got bit by a tiger," she said. She laughed, then winced and grabbed her side. There's something I thought I'd never say. I shook my head and felt the guilt tear through me. "I'm so sorry," I said. "I got you into this mess." Marianne placed her hand on mine. "It's not your fault," she said. "I came here of my own free will." I paused. "Why did you come?" I said it softly, not wanting her to think she wasn't wanted. I just didn't understand why she risked her life to come save me. She held both hands out to me so I could help her move to a sitting position. It took her a few seconds to get herself upright, but when she did, the color started to return to her cheeks. "You're the closest thing I have left to a family," she said simply. "I wasn't about to let them hurt you. Besides, eventually, the Order would have figured out that I was the one who told Jackson where to find you. I don't think they would have liked me too much at that point." I raised an eyebrow. "You have a point there. So, what are those two up to over there, all secret-like?" She nodded toward Jackson and Leah at the cave's entrance. I turned to look at them, an instant pang biting into my heart. Leah was a demon and therefore completely fair game for him. He said his feelings for me wouldn't change, but who knew what might happen after years of being in the underground, and the two of them already had a past I didn't understand. I did my best to shake it off. "They're planning our trip to the underground." Marianne grabbed a bottle of water and just nodded. Apparently, the underground was not news to her. They must have talked about their plan before they left our world. "What do you know about it?" I asked. "The underground." She shrugged and swallowed. "Not much, I guess. Just that it's deep under the surface and that magic can't be tracked down there. Some kind of shield blocks it from the upper world," she said. "Jackson said we'd be safe there for as long as we needed to stay. I just hope they let us in." "Did he tell you that they don't like humans?" "Yeah," she said, "but only because they've never really known any humans that weren't part of the Order. I think they'll warm up to us pretty quickly, especially after they hear what we've done to fight back against the Order." I nodded, but I was worried. What if we'd just traded one miserable life for another? Chapter 9, Is It Really You? Or It Really Is You, sorry. Miserable or not, there was no turning back now. Jackson and Leah decided on a route that would take us to one of the underground's portals. They were used to traveling fast by demon form, but using their magic would set off warning signals to both the Order and Leah's father. It was too risky, especially if Leah's father had already realized she was here. He might already have sent his sentinels out searching for her. We would have to walk it. By the time Marianne felt well enough to walk on her own, the first sun was already setting. Walking in the dark made me nervous, but Leah said we would do better under the cover of darkness anyway. Since one of Jackson's many talents was that he could see in the dark, he led the group up the side of the steep cliff. My feet argued with each step I took on the black rock. I tried to maneuver to the smooth places, but every once in a while I would hit a jagged part and the pain would shoot through my entire leg. In a way, I almost didn't mind the pain. I felt numb after hearing Jackson's news, so the pain in my feet was a reminder to keep moving forward. I kept one hand on the cliff wall at all times. Somehow, we all made it to the top. When I stepped out onto the blue-green grass of a nearby field, I realized just how tense I'd been holding my body. My shoulders were practically attached to my ears. I took a deep breath in and out, letting the panic melt away. No amount of breathing could get rid of my fear and sadness, though. "We're heading toward the obsidian forest," Jackson said. He pointed off to the east. "See there?" In the far distance, I could see a wall of trees, black as night and thick as any forest I'd ever seen. "Ominous," Marianne said. "We should keep moving," Jackson said. He was all business. "Stay close and be as quiet as you can." "Yes, sir," Marianne said. She followed closely behind Jackson, but the way she limped made me wonder if she really was up for this trip. Leah had offered to carry her part of the way, but she'd refused and said she was fine. I hung back from the group a little bit. Being too close to Jackson right now just made me ache. The grass slid under the bottom of my feet like oily snakes. Had it rained here? The ground squished with each footstep, and I had small seeds snuggling between my toes. Definitely an improvement over the solid rock, but I kept glancing down to make sure there were no bugs crawling on me. Soon, though, the second sun began to slip down below the horizon, leaving nothing but darkness and the light of a single amber moon that rose slowly above the trees of the obsidian forest. No one spoke as we walked, and, unlike home, there were no crickets or frogs to sing into the night air. The only sound in my ears was the sound of the light wind as it hissed across the tips of the grass. I let the steady rhythm of each footfall lull me into a kind of hypnosis. I wanted to forget the horror of the attic at Shadowford, the nightmare of facing death, the heartache of forbidden love. Walking here in the grass under a foreign moon might be my last real taste of freedom for a long time. I opened my heart to it, letting myself be vulnerable to the night just for a moment. I tried to remember a simpler life, but when had my life ever been simple? Maybe in the very earliest of days before that first fire, before my powers had ever manifested. But my memories of those days were few and far between. It was easier to remember the tough times, the bad foster homes, and the fear of knowing I was different. My whole life, I'd longed to fit in and belong somewhere. I'd wanted to find other girls like me who could move things with their mind and see the world the way I saw it. "Be careful what you wish for," I sighed. Who would ever have thought that finding those girls would lead to all this? As we walked in silence, I wondered what Lark and the others were up to back home. Had things gone back to normal? Did they ask about me, or had the order wiped their memories? I thought about the fact that somewhere in that town I had a half-sister, a real flesh and blood family member. Everything had happened so fast. After the night I'd first read my mother's journal, I hadn't had time to think about my sister very much. She might only be a half-sister, but I wanted to find her more than anything. She was my father's daughter, and maybe, if they both were still alive, we could have a normal family someday. Well, normal except for the witch thing. Was my sister a witch? I guess I'd never given it much thought. Just because she'd been born in Peachville didn't mean she was part of the order. Still, as I looked up at the rising amber moon, I wondered when I would ever get back there to look for her. Up ahead, Jackson froze, then crouched down toward the ground. He put a finger to his lips and motioned for us to get down. I broke away from my thoughts and dropped to my knees in the tall grass. I looked all around, trying to figure out what had him spooked. I held my breath, not wanting to make a sound in the near silence. Somewhere in the distance, the grass rustled with movement. My legs tensed, ready to run. I didn't know who I was more scared of, The sentinels, the hunters, or the crazed twin sister whose sister I had killed. My heart raced. I turned my eyes to Jackson, waiting for some cue to run or fight. After a few minutes, he stood and gestured for us to follow again. This time, I kept my attention in the present, not wanting to make a mistake that could cost us our lives. We only made it another half hour before 7 flames appeared in the distance. Jackson must have seen them the split second after I did. Quickly, he ducked behind a large boulder, furiously signaling for the rest of us to hide. I watched as the flames drew closer. I could see now why Jackson looked so frightened. Walking in a straight line across the field were 7 men in matching black and red uniforms. The sentinels? It had to be. Magical orange flames hovered in the air beside each of them, illuminating the area like large torches. I held my breath and crouched even lower to the ground. Everyone else in our group was dressed in dark colors, but my white dress stood out against the night. If the light caught it at all, the sentinels would see us for sure. Then what would become of us? Jackson made it sound as if we'd all be thrown into the dungeons. The sentinels drew closer, their light reaching almost to the rock where we hid. 5 or 6 steps to the right, and the flames would have given us away. The 4 of us huddled close, a mass of tension and beating hearts. Even Leah seemed frightened of her father's men. I don't think any of us took a single breath or moved a muscle until the men had safely passed us by. That was close, Leah said. Too close, Jackson said. We're going to have to try to move faster. I think we'll be safer once we get into the darkness of the forest. I stood and stretched out my aching legs. I reached my hand out to Marianne, helping her up from the ground. She winced and held her side for a moment. Are you okay to keep going? I asked her. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't feeling well. Let's just get somewhere safe, she said. I'll be fine. Not wanting to waste another moment, Jackson once again led us toward the outline of trees in the distance. Even though we'd already been walking for a while, the forest still looked far away. It was going to be a long night. I wasn't sure how much time had passed when I could have sworn I heard a twig break nearby. I turned around, frightened, and half expecting to see a sentinel standing behind me, but the area was dark and silent. Jackson came back around to me, following my gaze toward a couple of outlying trees. What is it? He asked. I heard something, I whispered, like a branch breaking underfoot. He listened for a moment, then shook his head. I don't see or hear anything, he said. Maybe it was just an animal. Yeah, maybe, I said. A feeling in my gut told me otherwise, but maybe it was just my fear talking. Then, about 20 minutes later, I thought I heard footsteps behind me in the grass. Just in front of me, Marianne flipped her head around. Judging from her wide eyes, I'd say she heard it too. Jackson, I said, there's someone following us. I heard footsteps. Me too, Marianne said, but I don't see anyone. Worry darkened Jackson's features. He looked toward Leah. What do you think? Do you sense anyone? See anything? Leah turned in a circle very slowly, taking her time to study the areas around us. If someone is following us, they're very good at concealing themselves. She motioned toward a cluster of small bushes and rocks just ahead, then whispered something in Jackson's ear. He nodded, then told us to follow him as if nothing were wrong. When we reached the bushes, Leah stealthily dropped from the group and hid behind them while the rest of us kept moving forward. I wasn't sure exactly what was going on until a few seconds later when she leapt out from behind the bushes and placed her hand around the biceps of an unusually small man with spiked hair and a very large nose. As soon as we saw what was happening, the rest of us ran back toward her. Why are you following us? She asked, her eyes locked on the man's face with a deadly focus. Princess, the man said in a breathy voice, it really is you. Your father has placed a reward for anyone who finds you, you know. He struggled against her grip, suddenly breaking free. His body started to turn to black smoke as he shifted to his demon form, but before he could complete the transformation, Leah reached into her pocket and threw a glittering powder on him. The man froze like a statue in mid-shift, half man, half smoke. Damn, Jackson said. What do we do now? We keep moving, Leah said, only faster this time. That powder will only hold him for an hour, maybe 2 if we're lucky. There's no way we'll make it to the portal in an hour, Jackson said. Not if we keep wasting time, Leah said. Without even discussing it, she lifted Marianne onto her back and began to run toward the tree line. Jackson turned to me, our eyes meeting in the near darkness as he reached out and lifted me into his arms. I threw my hands around Jackson's neck and buried my face in his shoulder as he ran. I tried not to think about our past or how this would probably be the last time I felt my body pressed against his. I focused only on the rhythm of his feet against the ground. When we reached the edge of the obsidian forest, we stopped and looked back, the silhouette of the frozen man, black against the night sky. Just barely finished it before the top of the hour. So a difficult moment for Harper, and only more difficult things to come, more difficult realizations yet to come. And a bit of some moments of introspection and wondering how things are going back in Peachville. And, in so many ways, by the time I had reached this book and started having Harper in the shadow world is when I really started understanding that in order for this, as the story began to grow and the world began to grow, I started to understand that I could tell a better story if I could split it out into multiple points of view. So this book and Demons Forever are in Harper's point of view. But once you get to Emerald Darkness, which is book 7, the points of view split out to multiple. So yeah, it is much needed because I can't show what's happening in Peachville because we can only see what Harper sees. And I can't show what's happening in Jackson's mind because we can only see what Harper knows, and sees. So that is definitely good. Now, you guys let me know too. So we started reading, that was like 40 minutes of reading, which is fine for me, but it's in this book, it's a longer book. And so it's harder to find like a good place to end. But I do want your feedback. If you feel like that you were starting to kind of lose attention span, or it was just a little bit too long to read or to listen, let me know, because we can shorten these chapters if we need to. But if you enjoyed it and felt like you wanted it to keep going, then let me know that too, because I will definitely take the feedback. We are very flexible here. So if we need to kind of shorten them a little bit, then we can shorten them a little. And thank you very much, Evelyn, for saying good voice acting, because I feel like when I was listening to an audiobook when I was doing my writing retreat, and she does such a good job of like the male voices are totally different. And then each of the female voices are very different. And mine are just kind of like, is it Jackson talking or is it Leah? I have no idea because I don't give them each their own voices. So I hope it's still enjoyable. And I hope you guys are still getting you still get the dialogue tags and you understand who's talking at any given moment. But I am feeling my way around the voice acting part of it so that hopefully I can do some audiobooks. But before I do that, I definitely I'm going to be kind of shifting chapters back and forth to a friend of mine who does audiobooks to get a little bit of feedback on trying to create different voices. So thank you. So it seems like everybody so far enjoyed it. Didn't feel like it was too long. Jennifer says I could listen to you read for hours. Thank you very much for saying that. This one for sure was especially that moment. If you could put yourself in Harper's point of view, like if you could really put yourself in Harper's shoes, although she's not wearing any shoes, and you think about like walking through grass at night in a foreign world where the moon is a different color, where there's this black forest, like obsidian trees, there's an ocean that looks very different. It's just, and thinking like, not only are they telling me I'm never going to get to go home again, but I'm also not going to be able, like, I'm always going to be an outsider here. It's one thing to be the kind of outsider where you're the foster kid and things like that, but to be an outsider where you're literally, everybody kind of hates your kind and sees witches like you as being bad or the enemy. It's like Marianne seems to take a little bit of a better tack toward it, because she's saying like, they'll they'll like us. Of course, they'll like us. Once they know that we hate the order as much as they do, they're going to come around. But Harper, I think at this point doesn't see much hope. But what I do love about Harper is that she's not sitting there going, this is my life forever. She's specifically already, when she's sitting back there kind of processing the way she feels, she's already thinking, I'm going to stay here until I get strong, and I'm going to do everything I can to learn to be as strong of a witch as possible so that I can go back and fight them alone if I have to. And I just always love that about her, because you can't keep her down for too long. So I think that is, that's one of the things I love about Harper so much. So it's tough to see her go through that, but she goes through a lot more than this. She's a strong girl. Hi, little baby girl. You want to say hi to everybody? You say hi. What you doing? Just what else can I get on your desk, mommy? So Friday, we will have a coffee chat. Not too much of a dun 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 moment, but next week you will finally get to see this infamous underground, which is kind of a cool moment. And you get to, I think maybe you're going to go ahead and get introduced to some of the characters that will be with us throughout the rest of the series that you will come to love and adore. So there's always new characters being introduced in this, especially as we get into the demon world. There are a couple of inconsistencies here, like things that are kind of big deals in this particular episode that don't really become, or that I might change later if I ever sort of change some things. So we'll talk about what those are in Friday's coffee chat. That's candy.
Open it.
No, we'll not open it. No opening it. Here, hold this.
No.
No. Okay. Okay. So Friday we will have a coffee chat. If Christabelle is still here, if she wants to go ahead, she'll put up a thread in the disc or in the Facebook channel. Christabelle is here. She's already made the coffee chat post. Also, I know sometimes there are a lot of questions posted in the Discord server too that I just don't always have time to get to. So if you are not on Facebook, but you have some questions that I haven't answered, feel free to tag them in some way and say, hey, Sarah, this is a question for Friday's coffee chat, which would be great too, because I don't always get a chance to answer all the questions over there either. But otherwise, if you are not in our Discord server, you are welcome to come join us. And if you're not on Facebook, come join us there. And I forgot to mention, today we hit 6,000 subscribers over on this channel. So thank you all so much for your subscription and for being a part of this community. And we will have a good time on our coffee chat on Friday, you guys. All right, we will see you then. She's got this crystal now that's pointed. Be careful with that. And thank you all so much for your support and for listening to me at the beginning of this episode. So it means a lot to me. All right, you guys, we didn't lose power, so it was a good one. I will see you all on Friday. Bye. 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 All right, we will see you guys then. Bye.